Hey guys, Matthew here, and welcome to my first impression for the 3.12 Path of Exile League called Heist. In this video, I'll go over basically my understanding of the league as well as the rewards for it and all of the new stuff. I'll try not to take too long, because honestly, my first impression of this league is just a big, huge question mark. I don't really know what's going on at all. I listened to the interview, I read all of the articles and all that, and still, all I'm left with is a big question mark. I don't know what to think. Now, of course, I'm always happy. I'm always hyped about a new league, a fresh economy, more crafting, more making currency, new stuff. It's always fun, right? But I'm having a hard time getting super hyped because I don't really understand what this league is about, or at least what the end game is supposed to be. We haven't been teased with any kind of like end game boss fights or anything like that. From the end game rewards, which I'll be going over relatively soon. Also, nothing that I'm super crazy about. But either way, let's just go ahead and get right into it. So it's called Heist. As the name suggests, we're basically going to be stealing stuff. It's going to require some markers, some blueprints, some contracts, a lot of different things. As you can see here, which I'm going to go over. I made a little bit of a notepad explaining my understanding of it. Now, this could be wrong. Feel free to, tell me in the comment section if I'm wrong about some of this stuff, but it's how I saw it. So I'm not going to talk too much about this because I'm going to go over it real soon. And then, yeah, you're going to execute the heist. You're going to equip your crew. Now, this seems like just some kind of bonuses that allow you to do some higher tier heists. Because if you want to be doing the highest of the higher tier heists, you're going to need some better equipped allies or specialists, I believe is what they're called. So yeah, that's really it. Now, the idea is that we are doing heists to make our way into doing grand heists, and grand heists require multiple of these specialists to do different things, as well as, more of the blueprints, because the blueprints are basically these like zones from the heist that allow you to understand how you're going to navigate through it and whatever. You could see it as basically, I'd like to compare it as probably Incursion and the Temple of Atsuatl. How there's like some doors that you have to open with the stones in the incursions. It kind of feels that way to me. You're gonna have to get an extraction point, an escape route, and then all of these different things that are gonna lead you to some rewards. As you can see here, some like chests and whatnot. So from the grand heists, there's 4 exclusive rewards which are tied into the league. And none of them, to me, seem that insane. But if there's one word that I think is perfect to describe this league, it is variety. So it looks like a league which is going to bring a lot of variety to the game, especially because of the replica of the uniques, which I'll go over with in a minute. So there's the trinkets. The trinkets basically just give you more loot. They're gonna have their own special slot, so it's not like you have to sacrifice anything for them. I don't know how many you'll be able to have at once, but they're pretty nice. They give you basically a little bit more juice from your heists, and they seem to be corrupted, meaning that you won't be able to mess around with them. That being said, it seems that there is potential to turn these into money makers from using them and using proper combinations, which probably leads to a lot more rewards. So that's pretty cool, but nothing crazy. The alternate quality gems, I think, is going to be, I feel like this is basically them trying to make awakened gems all over again. The only thing is awakened gems is only for supports, while this is actually going to work for skills as well. So for example, here you see Cleave, you see Herald of Agony. So non-support gems are also going to benefit from these alternate quality. And I mean, there's going to be 3 different variations for every single one of these skill gems. So there is going to be a lot of potential there, because the way I see it, I think basically they're going to be taking all of the increases and making them into more multipliers. And that is very powerful. Kind of the way that awakened skill gems do, basically. So that's gonna have a lot of power creep adding to the game. I think, at least the way it looks like it. and also just a lot of variety, potentially like you know, more clear speed oriented or just more single target oriented, stuff like that. So I'm pretty happy about that. This change is going to bring a little bit of variety to different builds. So that's nice. Nothing crazy though, but again, just a little bit of power creep. Now, if I had to guess, these are probably going to be weighted, meaning since there's 3 alternate quality versions for each of the gems, there's probably going to be one that is, you know, significantly stronger, one that's stronger, and one that's just different kind of thing. And like the significantly stronger one is probably going to be rarer. At least that's my guess. I'm not 100% sure about that. Now, where there's a lot of variety that's going to come in is from the replica of the uniques, I think, because it's, from the look of it, it looks like it's basically going to make a lot of obsolete builds less obsolete. So there's been many metas in PoE over the last 10 years. From when it was first released, there's been a bunch of different metas, and this league and these replica of different uniques seems like they're trying to bring back a lot of these skills that are no longer meta, that nobody uses anymore, by giving them some replica of uniques that are going to make them viable against. For example, if we take Elemental Buzzsaw, which is a crit melee build that is based purely on having tons and tons of elemental damage, flat elemental damage, instead of the new meta, which is physical damage conversion, because conversion has been stronger ever since it really became a thing. So flat elemental builds are pretty useless now. But if you slap on an Abyssus like this that has 110% melee crit multi, but then it looks like there's a lot of flat damage here on this Abyssus, then it does give you a lot of power to some of these pure elemental builds. And I think that's kind of what they're going to be doing with a lot of this stuff. So for example, this one triggers Toxic Rain instead of Rain of Arrows on the Lionized Paws. So it seems like they're basically just trying to bring a lot more variety to the game, and I think that's pretty cool. Now, do I think any of this stuff is going to be endgame? Probably not so much. Is there going to be some hefty price tags? Yes. There's obviously going to be some new metas that form up, especially with, you know, Twitch streamers and YouTube videos saying that this replica and this variant is like insanely strong, and everybody just, you know, goes and buys that thing. Of course, there's going to be some things that are going to be expensive. There's going to be some 1C uniques that are probably going to be, you know, multiple exalts, replacing some of the even top tier uniques. There's probably going to be stuff like that depending on the meta, of course. That being said, this is going to be like playing the lottery, at least is what it looks like, because most of these are going to be trash. They've always been trash, and they're probably going to stay trash. So it is going to be a little bit of lottery, and knowing GGG, it's obviously going to be weighted, meaning a replica of a Headhunter is going to be rarer than a replica of some, you know, Lionized Paws. So, well, if there is a replica of a Headhunter, of course, I'm not sure. But in the end, I still think that this is going to be like playing a lottery, and I don't think that people are going to be making a whole lot of currency off of the replicas themselves. Now, that's another thing when it comes to flipping these replicas. Now, there's probably going to be a market for that. That's for sure. So good filters for these replicas. Once we figure out which ones are good or bad, are probably going to be pretty important. Now, the only thing that I'm really hyped about when it comes to this league is basically this whole thing here, the new weapon and body armor enchantments. So there is going to be some significant drawbacks to them. So for example, this one has 200% increased attributes requirement, but that makes the strength requirement 630, which is a lot. But there's some pretty crazy advantages here. Physical modifiers have, you know, 15% increased effect. This is going to potentially allow us to make some of the best weapons in the game. Now, the only thing I'm not sure about, though, is it says these enchantments come on unnaturally powerful rare items. Now, I don't know what unnaturally powerful rare items actually means. I really don't know. Does that mean that they drop with the enchantment and then you get the base that you get? And if it's a shitty base, it's another lottery again, kind of like playing a lottery ticket. If that's the case, I don't think farming these is going to be a proper way to make currency. That being said, buying the bases from other people and then crafting them into some very, very strong items is probably going to be a good way to make currency. So it kind of depends, but I believe these are going to be drops only. And if they are, then a lot of this is going to be on shit bases. So for example, this Pernarch here, which is completely trash, or this, you know, full dragon scale, which is also completely trash. Nobody's going to want any of this stuff. So it really is going to come down to getting it on the right basis. But if you can get it on the right basis, so for example, on an Astral Plate, on a Val Regalia, on a Jeweled Foil, on a Val Axe, now these are probably going to be worth a lot, especially with the right enchantments on them. And I don't know exactly how many of these enchantments are going to be available, and I don't know how strong they're actually going to be. But, for example, this whole 15% increased effect here, if we take, say, a 600 DPS foil, which is fairly achievable, and it's been achievable for a long time now, and we give it just the right amount of crafting, and we apply this, you know, 15%, it is a multiplication of 115%, meaning you end up with a 690 PDPS foil. Now, a 600 DPS foil was hard to make in a league, like in any league except for Harvest, of course. It was really easy. But say in Delirium, it was fairly hard to make a 600 DPS foil, but you could make one every single day if you really put your mind to it. So it was very doable given you had enough currency and enough tries laying around, enough crafts and all that stuff, and obviously the right base. Now, these 600 DPS weapons are potentially 690, and if you've played Delirium, the highest DPS foil in Delirium was 682, and that was mirrored over 50 times. Now, I know that when I say that, I'm speaking to only the top 0.001% of the population and the player base, but all that I'm saying here is basically that there is something to look forward to in terms of endgame for crafting, and to me, that is what I'm most interested about in the upcoming league. I'm probably not going to be chasing these myself, but I am going to be buying them when they do pop up with the right enchants to try to craft them into the potentially new best weapons and armors in the game, which is always kind of nice. And it's kind of crazy to say that when we just got Harvest, which made pretty much making every single item ever as easy as it's ever been, and some items which have never even existed prior to Harvest are now flooded the market in Standard. Well, they will be when the league merges with items that have never even existed because of how hard they are to make. So it is a very interesting thing. So there's obviously some new skills, oppressive curses, sharpened steel skills, whatever, and some new skills. As always, there's also some new uniques. I mean, from the reveal of these three things, there's nothing that I'm super hyped about. Now, this thing is kind of interesting, though, because enemies hits inflict temporal chains on you. Now, that requires you to get hit, which is not so great. But when you lose temporal chains, you gain maximum rage, meaning if you get a way to inflict temporal chains on yourself and then be immune to it via, say, a flask, you basically get permanent maximum rage. That's got potential, I guess. And you're also immune to curses while you have 25 rage, meaning you are immune to curses and you have maximum rage from just inflicting curses on yourself, inflicting temporal chains on yourself, and then just using a flask or whatever to get rid of that temporal chain. So that's it's gonna have somewhat of a place, I guess. This belt. Do I think it's a top tier belt like a new head or something like that? Obviously not, but it does look interesting at the very least. Some boots here, corpse walk when equipped, move speed, damage if you've considered a corpse, regenerate 0.25 life up to 3%, whatever, just a kind of usual 1C unique that you just sell to the vendor for all shards. At least that's what it looks like, but there's going to be over 25 new unique items and 12 new div cards, so we're going to have to wait and see if there's some much more powerful ones, but from the look of these, I'm not too crazy about it. There's obviously Path of Exile on Mac that came out, or that's coming out with a Heist expansion, so that's cool if you're a Mac kind of guy or girl. And there's some new supporter packs, which I gotta say look meh, at least for me. So now let's go ahead and tackle basically how I think Heists is actually going to work, because to be honest, it's like I said at the beginning of the video, kind of a question mark for me. I'm a little bit confused about how this works, but if I understood correctly, you're going to farm zones for both contracts and markers. You're going to farm the contracts for more contracts and markers, and you're going to use the markers to juice up your heists. Basically, the markers are what's used to pay for the specialists, and also for contracts and for heists. You could see it as basically soul fight for delving. You are going to farm the contracts themselves for the blueprints, and then you're going to use contracts alongside blueprints, which are going to lead to bigger heists, because the blueprints lead to the grand heists. And the drop from heists, such as artifacts, can be sold for markers, and it can also be sold to other players, obviously, because everything is itemized, meaning everything can be crafted and everything can be sold. Now, a GGG dev in the interview, when asked by Chris, said that it is potentially going to be you're potentially going to be able to self-sustain contracts. So that means that by farming contracts, you'll drop more contracts, which means you technically, if you're getting artifacts to pay for the markers and then you have enough markers to run the contracts, you're essentially going to be able to never stop farming contracts. So you wouldn't even have to actually map or do anything like that. You could just farm contracts over and over. That being said, when the guy, Mark, answered that question, Chris seemed a little bit unhappy with that answer, and said it is quite possible that it will be changed, and that's kind of what I'm expecting. I don't think they're going to allow us to just disregard the whole mapping and Atlas progression as a whole. Obviously, that wouldn't really make any sense. So, from the look of things, it looks like you farm maps for contracts and markers. You farm the contracts for potentially contracts, and also for markers, for artifacts, and for blueprints. You sell the artifacts for markers, and markers and blueprints leads to higher tier heists. That is my understanding of how it works. So, in conclusion, when it basically comes down to the speed at which you can farm grand heists. That is what the league is about, basically. So, as people who care about currency, our goal is going to be to find which part of getting to this grand heist is most profitable. So, are we going to make more currency by farming maps to sell both markers and contracts? Are we going to make more currency by buying markers and contracts in bulk and then selling the blueprints and the drops from the contracts that we're running? Or are we going to buy blueprints, markers, and specific contracts that lead us to basically being able to speed farm grand heists? Now, I think for the people who are going to be deep into the actual heist mechanics, this is probably going to be the way to make currency most efficiently, and also just overall just the best way to make currency, because this is going to lead to the biggest rewards from the grand heists, of course. And this is going to allow you to play that roulette or the gamble as many times as possible, because grand heist seems like this is where you're going to be making most of your currency if you're good at farming them and if you're efficient with your time. Now, if you're somebody who's a little bit more on the casual side or who doesn't really care much about the whole mechanic, you're probably going to be making most of your money off of farming maps and then selling the markers and contracts and completely ignoring that, kind of like with harvest and selling seeds. And finally, I guess, which is the biggest question mark for me, is what about buying markers and contracts and then selling blueprints? Because if you're somebody who enjoys farming the heist but doesn't want to go through the gamble of farming the grand heists or the trouble, you could instead just buy markers and contracts and forever run those and like over and over and over, and then just sell the blueprints to people who want to farm the grand heists. So being the middleman might be the most efficient way to make currency. Now, obviously, we don't really know until the league actually starts and we get to see what drops in the said contracts, how much blueprints sell for, what we can expect from grand heists. There's a lot of question marks, like I said, but this looks like is going to be the three ways to make currency in the upcoming league. And to be honest, until I get some further information, that's really all I have to say about this, because there's just a lot of questions that were asked during the interview that Chris said, you're going to have to wait and see, you're going to have to wait and see, you're going to have to wait and see. So I feel like I'm severely lacking information to make my mind on the whole league in itself. But the premise of it is fairly interesting. If I had to if I had to compare it to something else, I would say it's probably a mix of Betrayal and Incursion League. And both of those leagues were pretty fun. So that's probably all I have to say. Now, before I go, though, I do want to say a huge thank you to my patron and supporters, Mario, Luro, Gaikona, Kfish, Dr. Radu, Scott, Kevin, and Cassicus, as well as, of course, anybody else who is to remain anonymous and anybody else who has supported me in the past. Huge thanks to you guys. And for anybody wondering, the stream is going to be back tomorrow with preparation towards the 3.12 launch. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and tune into the stream. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.